So welcome, you guys. I'm glad to see you here. I'm glad to be here. My name is Executive Coach Gregory Downey. If those of you that don't know me, if you've never been on my calls, and this is your first time being with me, I hope that you'll have fun. I like to do a lot of interaction. I believe that we learn a lot better when we learn from each other. And it's been interesting because I've been studying words and the power of words and how words can make a difference in how we learn. And so I was thinking, you'll notice that I don't have any notes, right? And I was thinking, this could go one of two ways, right? All you have to do is just change the words around a little, and you get a completely different result, right? So, for instance, I could start by saying, what I'm going to talk to you about, God alone knows, right? Or I could say, God only knows what I'm going to talk to you about. And I say the same thing, but it means something completely different. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. I did provide you guys with a handout. There's a place where you can take some notes. And today we're going to talk about the 5 steps of the law of attraction. And we're going to go in depth about the 5 steps. It probably will seem a little bit old hat, but hopefully what I share with you will give you a completely new experience and strengthen your relationship with those 5 steps. So there's people hiking to the falls. You can hear them yelling. So who here knows the 5 steps by heart? Who here has them memorized? Anybody? Okay, what's the first step?
Know what you don't want.
That's right, to know what you don't want. Okay, and so I'm going to run through the 5 steps really quick, and then we'll go back and talk about each one in more depth. So what's the second one?
Know what you do want.
Know what you do want. Third step.
Never lie.
That's close.
Uncover
and clear limiting beliefs. Okay, next step. You got it. Never lies. And the last step, and probably one of the most difficult,
let go.
Is to let go or to surrender. It's interesting. I talk to a lot of people all over the world, and when English is a second language, if I was to say surrender, and you translate in Spanish, what does that translate to almost?
Rendirse.
Yeah, well, what does that mean?
Surrender.
Does that mean to wave the white flag?
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't that something completely different than what we really want to do, though?
Yeah.
So, in translation, what we're doing is we're handing it over to a higher power, right? We're handing over the outcome and not trying to control that over which we have no control. So let's go back and talk about the first step. So the first step is to be really clear about what you don't want. Who feels like that's really counterintuitive? How many times have you heard from other teachers and practitioners that, you really shouldn't focus at all on what you don't want, right? Because then you'll attract a bunch of gobbledygook into your life. And so...
Well, when you have been when you have been through a couple of divorces, you really understand that.
Uh-huh.
Right, yeah. And if you're a mom or a parent, I think you get that really well.
So, but what about validation? We as humans, okay, we're sometimes ruled by ego, and our ego doesn't want to really think about the things that we don't want, because that means that we're what? If we have things that we don't want in our life, the ego says, oh, well, you're flawed. You're broken. You've got all this stuff that you don't want. And heaven forbid that anybody find out that you're human, right? That's right. And so if you get emotional and you focus on it, well, that'll bring you more. But what if you resist it? What if you try to distance yourself all the time from the things that you don't want? What happens there?
It's going to attract it.
That's right, because what you resist... Persists, that's right. So when we look at the things that we don't want, it's very important to at least validate it, right? And to put it down on paper, recognize that it's there. When we bring out the things that we normally would keep in secret, those things tend to lose their power over us. We validate that they're there, and we're okay. I often use the story. There's an individual who was going to go into, and this is a true story, he was going to go into information radio. And he wanted to have an influence on the way that we think here in America. And he had some pretty sordid things in his past. He was a cocaine addict. He was strung out on alcohol and had a terrible marriage, wasn't a great father, attempted suicide a couple times. And here he's positioning himself as a person of influence. And he's got all these things that are in his closet. And what do you think the first thing that he did was? He told everybody about it, right? He just got it out there. So that way it had no power over him. Okay, so there it is. Big deal, right? And so I call this the fork of empowerment. And so you want to write that down, the fork of empowerment. So anybody ever seen Alice in Wonderland or read the book?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the story, Alice comes to a fork in the road, and she's met by the Cheshire Cat. And what does she ask? Which way do I go? And what does the cat say?
Where you wanna go?
Where do you want to go? And she says, well, I don't know, really. And then somebody said it.
It don't matter.
It doesn't matter. If you don't,
Where you go, because
that's right. If you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't matter which way you go. So, how many of you have been at a place in your life where you felt like life just sent a bunch of stuff your way and you had no real control? Like it was just like you were living on the ropes, like a boxer that was getting beat up. I think we've all been there. When we look at the things that we don't want in life, right? The reason I call this the first part of the fork of empowerment is because you can choose. You can look and say, okay, I've got all this stuff that I don't want. And either I can keep going down that road or I could choose a different road, right? And that brings us to the second step of the law of attraction, which is to be clear about what you do want. So once you start listing what you do want, now you're fully empowered, right? It's your choice and nobody else's. You can either go down the road that will bring you all the things that you don't want, or you can go down the road that will bring you all the things that you do want. It's a matter of choice. And so who here, when you came into the coaching program, was challenged to do that listing process where you list everything you don't want and then everything that you do want? Who felt empowered by that? And what was your experience?
Well, it made me analyse the things that were going on in my life that I had just accepted before.
Okay.
And then I really was forced to think about it. You know.
So when you say just accepted, was that just kind of going along to get along?
Yes.
Okay. And I forgot your name. It's, don't tell me. Claudia, that's right.
Claudia.
What was your experience?
Well, I faced a lot of resistance at first.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I didn't want to look at the things I didn't want.
Okay. Was it hard to look at the things that you did want?
Yes.
Was there any part of you that thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I can ever have those things?
Yes.
So I don't have the ability to have you hit *61. So if you guys want to be in the queue, let me just see a hand, and I'll get to you as we go around. So who else had an experience with that listing process where you really felt like, hey, this is pretty empowering? What was your experience?
real easy to find what I don't want.
Oh, yeah.
Tough to find what I do want.
Yeah? So what made it difficult to find what you did want?
Just probably not sure
Yeah?
what I really want. I know some things I would like to have, but I'm not sure. So I continue working on that.
Who here had an experience where you determined your career like back in high school? Okay, so when I first came into the coaching industry, I had a student, and his name happened to be Dave. It wasn't Dave Green, but it was a gentleman that was an accountant, and he was in his mid-40s, and I was in my mid-30s at the time, and so the 40s, seemed kind of far off for me. I thought, oh my gosh, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And on July 30th, I just turned 43, so here I am. So we were talking. He was an accountant, and he really liked his family life. His relationship with his wife was great. His relationship with his kids, fantastic. But he was an accountant. And he absolutely dreaded. Every morning, he said he would go into, anxiety that he had to get up and get in his car and go to this job where he was an accountant. So I started asking questions, and the first thing I asked him is, well, when did you decide, or how did you decide that you wanted to be an accountant? And he said, I must have been a sophomore or junior in high school. And so my next question was, well, how did you decide that? And what do you think he said? Well, go ahead.
Somebody told me.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah, everybody around him said, you're so good at math, you'd be a great accountant, right? And so in high school, what does he know? He doesn't know the playbook, right? So he just says, oh, all these people say that I'm good at math. They say I'd be a good accountant, right? So I'm off the hook. I don't have to really think a lot about what I want to do. So he goes on to college. He becomes an accountant. And, for 20 years after college or so, he's struggling to be an accountant. And so I asked him, and this is where the empowering questions started to come. I said, so what have you learned since college? He's like, well, I've learned a lot of things. And I said, well, have you learned that there are different options, different opportunities out there? And he said, well, sure. And I said, did it ever cross your mind to maybe pursue one of those opportunities? And he said, well, not really. And I said, why? And he said, well, because my whole life I've identified myself as an accountant. And I said, okay, well, who made that decision? And he said, well, I did. And I said, how old were you? And he said, 17. So I said, how long you let that 17-year-old run that part of your life? Yeah. Right? So think about the decisions that you make in your life and when you've come to those forks of empowerment. Each and every day, I believe that we come to that fork in the road where we can either continue creating what we don't want, or we can chase and follow and pursue and desire and have passion about what we do want. Okay? Go ahead.
Gregory,
Yes, sir.
I just found the correct translation for surrender.
Yes, please.
It would be entregarse.
Entregarse.
Entregarse, which means give yourself up to superior. To superior.
Okay. Well, that's better than kind of throwing in the towel or raising the flag, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand, and we'll talk about that. So every day we need to look at what we don't want and what we do want. Don't emotionalize about what you don't want, but just validate that it's there. Remind yourself that you have a choice, right? Every day is a new day to be empowered. Okay? Am I explaining that clear enough? Am I going too fast? Okay, awesome. So let's move on to step 3 in the law of attraction, and that is to uncover and clear limiting beliefs. Now, I get a lot of students that say, well, I don't know how to uncover my limiting beliefs. How do you do that? Right? Has anybody ever struggled with that?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you finally do, or how did you finally get to a place where you were able to uncover your limiting beliefs?
I still haven't done that yet, so.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. So I'm going to empower you today. Okay, so why do we clear? Okay, so the third step of law of attraction is about clearing, but why do we clear? And there are a couple of reasons. This is kind of a loaded question. But to get unstuck, okay.
Get quiet.
To get quiet, okay.
Also, you can't fill a bottle up that's already full with something else.
Yes, absolutely. It frees us up to have a different energy, doesn't it? Has anybody ever heard of the Thomas Emotional Scale?
Thomas emotional?
Yep, the Thomas Emotional Scale number 2. I should have included it in my notes. When you go look for it in Google, you have to look in Google Images. It's kind of hard to find, but it will usually come right up. And what it says is that courage vibrates at about 200, and that's kind of the axis between suffering and non-suffering is when we come to a point of courage. For some people, anything lower than 500 they would see as suffering, and that's lower. That's love is at 500 on that scale. Anything above 500, you're working your way toward enlightenment. But for a lot of people, they start to come out of suffering at 200. And so when we start to clear, it changes our energy, right? When you start, who here was skeptical or maybe didn't think that they could get free of their limiting beliefs, and once they started to clear, you really started to believe, oh, this this works. So you started to move from courage to a higher level, right? You started living at a different level. But there are 2 reasons that we clear. Number 1 is that we want to free ourselves from resistance. And number 2 is that we want our beliefs to be an energetic match with our desire. If your desire and your belief are not an energetic match, then you're living in self-sabotage. Okay? And so those are the 2 purposes of clearing. And getting free from self-sabotage is where we free ourselves from suffering. That's suffering being defined as anything less than we would reasonably choose from ourselves on a feeling or emotional level. So anything less than we would reasonably choose for ourselves on a feeling or emotional level. So we hear a lot about clearing, and there are lots of different clearing techniques out there. And so I don't want to belabor a lot of clearing techniques, but I want to talk about the 5 steps of clearing, because this is so very important. If you don't master this, you will not be able to measure whether you're winning or losing. Okay, and I want to maybe share an example of why that's so important. Who here is brave enough to share how they measure their own success? How do you measure? Go ahead.
By my inner peace.
Okay, that's good. I like that. You've been on my calls. It's kind of a loaded question, but who here hasn't been on one of my calls? Okay.
You've been my coach.
Oh, well, you've been on most of my calls. You have the answer. Who has not been on one of my calls? Okay, so let's see. The gentleman in glasses, what's your first name?
Carl.
Carl. Oh, hey, Carl. Okay.
Carl.
That's awesome. So, Carl, so how do you measure your success?
Say that again.
How do you measure your success?
I have no idea.
Really? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I'll be happy
Okay.
and lit up when I'm
Okay.
on my good path.
I love it. Nobody is giving me the wrong answer. Go ahead.
I measure it by my experience.
Okay, experience. It's good.
I am happy and I achieve what I want to do.
See, you guys are all so great. You guys could be teaching this. So what most people say is they measure their success by their outcome, by whether or not they've reached their goal, right? Now I want you to think about that. Okay, it's fun to reach a goal, but what if every day you woke up and you said, I haven't hit my goal yet? Right? How many people do that? A lot of people do that. They quantify success by whether or not they've reached their goal. Has anybody ever heard of a guy named Earl Nightingale? He's one of the founders of Nightingale Conant. So he probably coined the best description of success that I've ever heard. And you want to write this down. It's the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Now, what does that mean, progressive realization?
It's a journey.
It's a journey. Okay, and clearing is the most important part of that journey. If you want to quantify whether you're winning or not winning, you can do that through clearing and the results that you get through clearing. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 steps of clearing. This is probably one of the most important things, I believe, aside from active gratitude, that you'll ever learn about personal development. Just my opinion, but you tell me if you agree. So, first is you need to identify the belief, right? Now, if you're having difficulty identifying the belief, the second step sometimes comes into play by default, and that's to identify the feeling of the belief. Right? What happens? What goes on inside you when you contemplate the belief, or when you find that you're challenged by the belief? Right? The meaning that we give to that experience triggers what? The emotion. It's the emotion that we feel as a result of the experience. And then that emotion feeds what?
Something that you feel bad or you
Yeah. But where does it go in your mind? What part of your mind is fed by your emotions? We're talking pictures and emotions. It's your subconscious, and then your subconscious governs your behaviors or your actions. And so if you get into this cycle of self-sabotage, it's because you're on autopilot. Who here's ever driven home, right? And you get in your driveway and you wonder, how did I get here? You have a talking heads moment, right? You know, you imagine David Byrne is next to you. How did I get here? Your subconscious actually drives you home. Your subconscious is so confident in your ability to do that it goes on autopilot, right? And that's where we want to be with personal development. We want our subconscious to be on autopilot. So when you arrive at your goal, you wake up one day in your dream home, you're like, how did I get here? Right? So the second step is to uncover the feeling and to measure the feeling. You want to determine how triggered you are by the feeling, right? This is your measuring stick, your emotional reactivity to your limiting beliefs. So, we usually measure on a scale from 0 to 10. Now, step 3, we're actually going to apply a clearing technique. Now, what I tell my students is that clearing is learning, right? Because we're unlearning a way of behavior and relearning a new way of behavior. It's emotional learning, right? And so the more we feed those things that we want, the more we learn. So we want to apply a clearing technique. There are lots of different clearing techniques out there. I advocate personally for NLP. It helps me to help my student more quickly than a lot of the other clearing techniques that are out there. I can walk them through a guided visualization, use some metaphor, use some choice words and some energy exchange, talk right to their subconscious, and at the end of that, they're past that limiting belief. It doesn't matter if they've carried it for 30 years or 3 days, right? I just feel that it's really effective. And so whatever you choose, whatever you've learned, whatever works for you, it's personal, it's individual. So just choose the clearing technique that you feel is best for you. My email address, by the way, is gdowney@achievetoday.com. I have an NLP clearing technique that I actually recorded. It's a guided clearing technique. It's called hypnotic clearing. If you'd like a copy of that, I can send the link to you and you can access it through the internet. It's very easy. I just recommend that you don't do it while you're driving or using heavy machinery because it is hypnotic. So apply the clearing technique, okay? And then once you apply the clearing technique, then we're going to go back and we're going to repeat step 2, which is to identify and measure the feeling. Normally, you'll notice a shift. Maybe you started out at like a 10 or an 8 or, wherever you started. But you'll be able to measure where you are in relationship to that belief by your emotional reactivity once you've done the clearing technique. So you go back and you remeasure. And then the last step of clearing is rinse and repeat. Okay? So that means just to do it again. So Dave, how are we doing for time?
I'm sorry, what
Okay, rinse and repeat.
was number 4?
Number 4 is to go back and remeasure.
Remeasure.
Yeah, remeasure. So I'm going to show you a technique that I like. This is a kinesiology technique. I can't swear that I developed it. I don't really remember how it came about, but I want you... Now, this is going to be counterintuitive, but this is important. I want you each to think of a limiting belief that you have, okay? So not that we want to dwell on it, but I just want you to think of a limiting belief. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to close our eyes, okay? And you're going to imagine that your abdomen is the window to your feeling experience. They say that your digestive system really is your second brain, right? That it's an emotional center as well. And I want you to think about the belief that you have. I'm going to ask you all to kind of state your belief out loud quietly, and don't worry, nobody's going to listen to anybody else. With one hand, I want you to place it over your navel. And I want you to put your intention on the belief, and I just want you to state the belief out loud 3 or 4 times quietly, and I want you to notice what happens. Your body, your inner child, your spirit, your subconscious, whatever you choose to call it, is going to let you know where that belief lives in your body and what the emotional attachment is to that belief. So go ahead and put your hand on your abdomen, state it out loud 3 or 4 times, and then let's talk about what the results are. And if anybody feels their belief come up and you want to share, go ahead and raise your hand, jump in the queue. We'll talk about your results.
This is just about feeling it, right?
Just about feelings. Yeah, logic is irrelevant. When it comes to clearing, we don't do logic because, that's a good point. I'm going to talk about something that I didn't initially think about talking about, but I'm glad you brought it up. You guys need to hear it, which is why you just asked that. So once you get the feeling of your belief and you figure out where it is in you, you could just confirm to your subconscious by saying, okay, I've got it.
I think it's in my heart center.
In your heart center? Okay, thank you, Lila. Okay, so she asked a good question. We're just focusing on feelings. I want you to write this down. This is called the lie that binds. Okay, it's kind of a play on words from the tie that binds. The lie that binds is your ego will tell you 2 lies. Okay, the first lie is the initial limiting belief. I'm not worthy, or, that's only for other people, or, I don't have enough education. I mean, whatever it is.
How did you call it again?
The lie that binds, or the lie that ties you up,
And the first one you said was the?
is the first lie. So it's the limiting belief. The limiting belief is the first lie. So I'm going to ask for participation. What do you think the second lie is that the ego tells you?
You can't do it.
Okay, possibly that may be the first belief.
true.
What's that?
That it's true.
Almost the opposite. So a lot of times, how many of you have been confronted by a limiting belief and you turn around and you say, I don't believe that. That's just not reasonable or not rational. That doesn't make sense, right? 90% of my students that come into the program deal with worthiness. I don't deserve it. And then they perk up and they say, but I don't believe that. Because logically, it doesn't make any sense. Why do you think the ego does that? Gives you the limiting belief, but then tells you the second lie. Camouflage. What's that?
You can justify it.
Justify it, because if you didn't justify it, what would you do?
You wouldn't do it.
Right, and then what would you do?
Clear it.
Go on, you clear it or go on to something else.
Right, and that represents change, right? The ego doesn't like change. The ego wants to stay where it's familiar. So it will tell you two lies. First is the limiting belief. Second is I don't believe the limiting belief, and then you go wandering off looking for answers. And that keeps you spinning in circles and keeps you stuck, right? It binds you into that spot where you're disempowered. Okay? So I'm glad that you brought that up. So when you're dealing with clearing, trust your feelings, okay? Even if it's a low vibe feeling, right? Feelings are hard to fake. Has anybody ever faked a feeling? I mean, truly faked it? I mean, you could try to fake it, but I mean, has anybody ever really faked an emotion? That's a difficult thing to do. You can pretend to be happy. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're feeling it on the outside, right? So when we clear, we want to focus on feelings. And that's why it's so important to be able to bring that feeling up, to be able to measure it on a scale from 0 to 10. This is your yardstick. This is how you determine whether or not you're making progress in your personal development. Now, there are some clearing techniques that are a little bit more arbitrary. I won't single anyone out. But you do the clearing technique, and it's kind of a waiting game, right? You got to wait and see what happens in your life, if things change, if things resolve. Me, I'm too impatient for that. I'll admit it. I want to get results now. I want to see what I'm doing. Has anybody ever seen the movie Rudy?
Yeah.
Okay? So Rudy's talking to Father Kavanaugh, and Father Kavanaugh looks at him and he says, "You've done a heck of a job, kid, chasing down your dream." And what does Rudy say back to Father Kavanaugh? What does it matter what kind of job I did if it's not getting me the results that I want, right? And so in order to feel like you're making progress, you've got to see that you're getting results. And that's in this program. It's with anything, right? What if you were working with me for 4 months, and at the end of that 4 months, you couldn't tell whether or not you made any progress? You'd be frustrated, right? You'd think, oh my gosh, that was like the worst, a lot of good information, but I could have got that information out of a book, right? So it's important that you learn to apply these things and you learn to see the results that you're getting. Otherwise, you'll wake up every day and you'll tell yourself, I haven't reached my goal, so I'm not making any progress. Okay? Does that feel like good information? Yeah. Okay? All right, look to the left and to the right and tell the person next to you, I'm glad that you're here. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you guys are here. So, okay. So, who has a favorite clearing technique?
Well,
Who has a favorite clearing technique?
I studied in the coaching program. I mean in the program in Indian, I downloaded a recording with clearing limiting beliefs. I don't know who. It was a woman, but I don't know who recorded it.
Oh, that was Janine.
Oh.
In the elective classes. Okay.
Yeah. I used those two. His name was. Let me see. It was the benefit of the benefit.
Oh, okay.
That was very good. Benefit of the benefit. Oh, beautiful.
Stellars, Jay.
but yeah.
Yeah. I'll move aside if you guys want to get a picture real quick. It's a Stellar's Jay?
Blue jay. On the fence? Wow. There he is,
Modeling.
EFT.
EFT? Okay. Okay. Ho'oponopono? Okay. Any others?
Different interpretation of data.
Okay. See, a lot of those are real cerebral. You're probably a real cognitive type person that you analyze things a lot and you like to kind of measure things out. See, and where it's a different learning style, I like things that are more visual and emotional, which is why I really like NLP, because it's all about the metaphor, right? It's all about
Name of it?
NLP.
NLP.
Yep, neuro-linguistic programming.
What is the thing that's called It's Just a Program? That thing that,
The three-step clearing. It's just it. It's just the three-step clearing. There's no fancy title.
I like that.
There it is. That's not me.
Yeah.
That's just a program. You identify where you feel it. You know, there's actually some NLP in there. The disidentification from the feeling, where you distance yourself from the feeling. Maybe imagine that it's a weed, right? That you're pulling out of yourself and observing it. So let's go ahead and let's do an exercise. So by a show of hands, how many of you were able to identify the feeling of your belief? Just about everybody. Okay, so I just want everybody to close.
By feeling though, like where it was.
Yeah, where it was, what the substance of the feeling was.
Like I don't know what it's called, but I felt like an ache.
Okay, and you're touching your solar plexus, so I'm imagining it was around your heart chakra, somewhere thereabouts, or a little lower.
Top of my stomach.
Okay, perfect. So anybody else?
I also had it in my solar plexus.
Solar plexus? Okay. Who would like to get clear of that belief in about 3 or 4 minutes? Okay, awesome. So go ahead and close your eyes, and I want you to take a deep breath, and I just want you to imagine now what it's like to be really relaxed. And just think about a time when it was okay just to relax now. And as you think about that feeling, I want you to assign a color to it. And once you are able to assign a color to that feeling, I just want you to confirm to your subconscious by saying, I've got it. And once you've got it, I want you to take a deep breath. And as you take a deep breath, allow your breath to wrap itself around that colored energy, wherever it is in your body. And you're going to feel a natural moment where you're going to want to exhale naturally. And as you exhale, allow your breath to carry that energy up into your neck and into your mouth and right out your mouth. And if you have to pull on it, like a ribbon or a handkerchief, or something like you're doing a magic trick, just pull all of the energy out of your body. And once it's all outside and right in front of you, just go ahead and confirm by saying it's all outside of me now. And depending on how loud you say it, I'll know where we are as a group. And you can nod or just raise your hand and let me know that it's outside. Okay, now that it's outside, I just want you to observe